So the damage after that, so I was like so tense when I like was going over for that first hit. I like squeezed the steering wheel and like bracing myself, and the impact, I buckled the steering column. So this tube actually bends up and down. It's hard to see in this view, but you can see the U joint is on the floor of the U-Haul, and then it goes like up and then back down towards the door. And so that's bent. And so what we did was we took a 3/4 inch tube and hammered it down the center to straighten it out. So we actually did the endurance race with the outer tube and an inner tube to straighten it out. So it was just that. Obviously the number on the top of the car was crushed, which we fixed, and the fire extinguisher. So that's the first rule that they changed. So when I came down, the fire extinguisher is like right next to me, right? Like kind of armpit level. And so I'm going down, and the impact just broke the fire extinguisher away from its mount. And the fire extinguisher was like off to the side. And Dr. Sharif just went to Walmart and bought another strap, but those were plastic straps. And now the rule is you have to have a steel strap.
Yeah.
And so that was because we broke our fire extinguisher mount, and it could have fallen and hit me or something, you know. So
and then the other rule, right, was that since you guys squished your number, because it used to be like a little cone or like a triangle.
I'll show you, hold that thought when we get to the next video of the rock crawl. You have a really good example of that. Yeah, they had to change that rule too.
They didn't put in any rules about the steering column. Like, I don't remember seeing too much about its rigidity, like how the strength of the material of the steering shaft.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they knew that this happened, right? I mean, we got back to the lab, and so like, you know, I tell the guy next that he's next. Still, you know, I always try to have a sense of humor about things. And I get out, and the only injury I had was my knee was scraped, and it was because this buckled like into my knee, you know, because like it, you know how your legs are right next to it, and so like it buckled to the side, and like I guess like kind of scraped my knee. So I had like a little scrape on my knee, and I had, which you'll see later, I had the seatbelt cut my neck where like, you know, my body weight was into the seatbelt. And so I had like what's that?
At that point, did you guys have 5-point harnesses?
Yeah, we did. And we had the wrist. Now I totally understand the wrist strap thing, because I mean, even though my instinct wasn't to put my hands out, I just kind of like just took my hands off the wheel, and I'm sure it helped keep my arms inward. But so yeah, we went out, and like within an hour, it took as long as it took Sharif to get back, and we did the race again. And it was, although I did have an insurance guy from SAE come talk to me. So like, asked me a bunch of questions, filled out these forms. I said like I wouldn't sue SAE and all this stuff. Oh, so here's take two. Yeah, I forgot, when we first showed up, you know how they do your tack, they give you a tack and they change your motor RPM, your governor settings. So everyone's at like 3,500 RPM or whatever. So I remember they gave it to James, and the judge was like, or the guy doing the Briggs and Stratton guy was like, hey, hold this for me, like, so I could read it while I'm tuning it. And so James is like looking at it, and then he tells me to start the engine. So I like take the lawnmower starter and just go and just smack James right in the nose, and just blood gushing everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, James, I'm sorry. And he had to go to the ambulance, which was parked right there. He went to the ambulance, and they gave him like a gauze and all this stuff. So then as soon as when I rolled, they put me in a cart and drove me to the ambulance. So it was like, you know, all right, you know, now you're the second time, like we've seen you this team, right? And they just checked me for like concussion and let me go. So yeah, that'll come back into play a little bit later. So this was just running the maneuverability a second time. So I just got back in and did it. And if you hear when you hear the audio on this, when I make that turn, you can hear a sarcastic clap by the audience. They're like, yay, he made it, he went the right way.
He can turn now.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the rock crawl. there's actually 2 versions of this video. So this was right after that, right? So as soon as we finish that, we do this and we roll it again, right? And
It's
the next
flipping
video
back.
is gonna be a little bit better.
Goodbye.
So look at that. Yeah, look at the number, right? So the number is flat now. It used to be like a TP. And so this happened also during the race, which you'll see later. And so during the race, they couldn't really see the number, right? And so the next rule was the numbers have to be on the side of the roll cage, like inboard of the roll cage, and like a cutout. So if you roll, you don't squash your number. So yeah, that was another rule that was because of us.
So I think we're on number 2 now. Rule number
Yeah.
for sure. Rule number 2 is
Yeah.
you have to put your numbers on the side of the car.
Yeah. So here we are for the endurance race. I have a couple stories about this. So you started at the top of this hill. Oh, so yeah, let me go back. So the cliff diving, right? So as soon as I'm down and I'm driving in the ambulance, they're driving me to the ambulance in a little like gator cart. I see, this was the Caterpillar proving grounds. So they got bulldozers everywhere, right? Before I could get to the ambulance, they had bulldozers up there making this huge mound of dirt around that turn, right? They realized we made a 180 turn at the end of a cliff, right? So if other cars can't make that turn, they're going to fall off this cliff. And so they build this big mound up so that wouldn't happen again. And that turn was supposed to be in the endurance race, right? So that was supposed to be part of the endurance race. And after I went off the cliff, they're like, we can't make that part of the endurance race, right? So they had to like bypass it and cut it and not go that way and make a new route the night before the endurance race. And they had this nice plan of 100 miles, and they did an exact 2-mile lap, and it was gonna be exactly 50 laps. And because of this, it ended up being like a 1.85 mile course. Oh my God. They're like, now we got to make it like 54 laps or something like weird, something random. And it's not like exactly 100 miles anymore. It's like ruined their whole plan for having a 100-mile race. So I go to dinner since my parents live in Arizona. They came. My mom saw me go off that cliff and was like hysterical. And so we go to dinner and we sit down at dinner. And like 2 minutes later, the group of judges from SAU walk in and sit next to us, and they see me like, no, you, right? And they're like, that's when they told me like, we had to change the endurance race and we had to change the number of laps because of you. And Jason was like the head judge, right? And so, and he always gave us crap. Like he'd always find something on our car to not pass tech, like. And after this, he like really, or maybe it was because of this that he was always doing that, but. So he was like super mad, and he was like, if I see you guys at all driving too aggressive or roll over, you're out of the endurance race, right? So he's like giving me this lecture. And so they ended up leaving before us. And the waitress comes over and was like, do you know those guys? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. And he's like, one of them left his credit card. And it was Jason, right? So Jason left his credit card at the restaurant. I'm like, perfect. So like right before the race, I see him and I was like, hey, Jason, thanks for dessert last night. And he's like, what? I was like, you left your credit card at the restaurant and I grabbed it for you. He's like, oh my God. He's like, thank you. So that I think saved us for what you're going to see in a little bit when we did roll over again, but he didn't kick me out. So, so this is the beginning of the race and this is a tabletop jump, right? And at first, everyone's going slow because we're all like bundled together, right? So on my first lap, I'm kind of going slow because I'm stuck behind a slower car. And then I start passing people. And then I couldn't make it back up the hill to the starting. Like, I'm like, the people I just passed are now passing me. I'm like, what's going on? So I get back around and the pits are just after this, right? So I come down, and by the way, the hill climb is to the left of this. So when you went up the hill climb, you were driving to the left on the screen and you drive up the hill. So this tabletop is down the steep, hill into the tabletop jump. So you get a ton of speed coming down, right? But I just like, I was flooring it and I just drove nice and slow over the hill. So I pull over first lap and they're like, what? And I'm like, the car's not going. I don't know. And I stayed in the car and Dan was there. and he goes around the back. He's like, the brakes are smoking, right? There's like smoke coming from the rotor. And we made our own rotors, our calipers, back then in the rear. So they were custom made. You know, we milled them in the lab and everything, the piston and everything. So normally, you know, you have like like on your front suspension, the piston has a return spring, right? So after you press the brake, it pulls the piston back, so you're not always hitting the brake. And our custom ones, we have a tight fitting O-ring on the piston, and the O-ring has enough elasticity to like pull the piston back. And so it was actually like just stuck on, and the O-ring was not pulling the piston back. And so our rear brakes were like had my foot on the brake the whole time, and that's how I was driving like the second half of that lap. So after I pressed the brake once, it was just locked. So I go, cut them, like cut the brakes. They're not gonna know. So we actually capped, because we had the proportion, we actually like capped off the brakes. And I get back on. And so we had already turned off the front brakes from our proportioning valve. Turned off the back. So then I realized we have no freaking brakes. So the second lap, now that I'm like going, I'm passing everyone, I'm like, perfect. I'm going down that hill climb with no brakes. And I think you're gonna see a video of what happens because of that. You'll see, I think, one car, this isn't us, that comes flying in. There's a lot of cars right there. So that one like kind of ran off. There's a lot of cars like that. So I come flying in and I'm by myself. So I think it's the next video. So I'm by myself because I stopped, the herd of cars is gone. So I'm by myself. The only place you can watch the race is right in front of this jump. So the whole crowd's there. There's a grandstand. I'm coming down by myself. I'm like, I'm gonna floor this thing. And I just like floor it. And this is what happened. This is me. So now you're gonna see a slow motion of this. This is Jason in the blue shirt. He's running after me to try and kill the car, you know, to like stop you or penalize you or something like that. And I don't know if you can tell, but I can hear the audience cheer because I landed on my wheels and my foot's still on the gas. And it just sputters a little, right? Because the gas is splashing around. And I like fist pump and I like keep going. I have no idea Jason's chasing me, right? And so I just keep
behind you.
Yeah, I just keep going, and everyone knows like we're the ones that drove off the cliff, and now we're like doing this roll. And this is Jason's ATV right here. After he misses me, which I don't know, I drive like 200 yards. I'm going through whoopties, and he pulls up next to me in the ATV, and I'm driving. I'm looking at him, and he's pulling over. He's like, "Pull over!" He's like pulling me over, like in Dumb and Dumber, like pull over, pull over. And I like pull over, and my goggles are all crooked. I think you'll see in the slow mo. My head just goes smack across the steering wheel, and it makes my goggles, and so I was like trying to drive like this, right? And my wrist like restraints were not letting me touch my goggles, and so he like straightens my goggles out, and he knows it's me, and he's like, I know he wants to like kick us out of the race, and I think because I got his credit card, he just looks at me and he goes, "What did I say at the restaurant last night?" And I just didn't even say anything, and he's like, "All right, keep going," and he like let us keep going. Let me play the rest of this. So here he comes trying to hit, and I'm like fist pumping, like, yeah, here's the slow-mo coming. Watch my head right here goes smack across the...
My goodness.
And then Jason's ready.
Stop that car.
Yeah. He's like, stop.
You missed it.
You almost ran him over.
Yeah. And then you can see the numbers kind of crush. This is the lap after that. And you can hear Dan go, did he roll over? Did he roll over? So the reason we rolled over like that time and a couple other times, you'll see on these whoopties, we had too much rebounding on the shocks. So you'll see, maybe not this video, when I'm going faster on one of the next ones, the rear end bounces up because we didn't have good rebound dampening. And so normally the fluid has to go back, you know, through certain holes on the other end. This is a good one. Like look at the back end just like bouncing up, right? Our back tires get air every time. And that's what the problem was. We didn't have enough testing that you can see it really bouncing up. Whenever you go over something, the back end would like pop you up like a springboard. And that's what was making us kind of roll so many times. So I think this is still me driving. So, you know, we had this plan for how many laps, how long to go before we're going to refuel and switch drivers. And then I was gonna do that last lap, and I get
5 rollovers.
I get. So now I gotta tell. There's a lot of videos now. I have to fill in the gap. So I get to the top, almost like where the cliff diving was, and all I have to do is get down that ramp to the tabletop, and I run out of gas. And back then we didn't have a headset, walkie-talkies, or anything, so I'm just stuck up there, and I'm waiting for like an ATV to show up, and it's probably like 15-20 minutes, and I mean we were passing everybody, like we were doing really well. So I had to get towed back to the pits to get a new driver and gas. So I get out, and James is gonna be the next driver, right? And James had never driven that competition before, I don't think. But he was like our lightest team member. And it was gonna be like me, it was gonna be James, it was gonna be J-Lo, and then me again, if we got that far. And or we're just gonna be 3 of us, however. So James gets in, and I'm like, look, you got no brakes, remember? I was like, on these whoopties, like the ones you just saw me going through, I was like, just go slow when you enter. Just take your foot off the gas, go in, and then once you're in it, you can keep it floored, and you'll just like kind of bounce through, right? Okay. So I sit down in the pits, and 30 seconds later, I just hear they had like a loudspeaker. Cal State LA, you need a new driver. Cal State LA, you need a new driver. And I'm like, what?
You just got in there.
Yeah. I'm like, he's got to be right here. So we just run we just run like to the side of the course. We just run, and we see James and the car pull over to the side, and James is out of the car. I'm like, what happened? And like, he rolled over. And so like the first, I think he said like it was too dusty, and he didn't see it was a whoopty coming, and he was just going full speed, and the back end like flipped up. So I'm like, J-Lo, oh, that's right. They made us go back and tack the frame. Like the top of the frame had a little crack in it. So I had to go back and tack the frame. They let us go. I'm like, J-Lo, you're going to race now. So it's your turn, and then I'll go again, right? So J-Lo starts driving, and he was doing awesome. In fact, he had the second fastest lap out of any car. So out of the 90 something that race, one of our lap times was the second fastest. Only the first place car had a faster lap. So like if we could have stayed on the course, like we had a top 5 car, as far as running the endurance race. So I'm sitting there with James in the pits, and he just looks at me and he goes, my spine hurts. And I was like, your spine hurts? I've never heard anyone say their spine hurts. What does that mean? And I was like, James, all right, I mean, I got to stay in the pits. I was like, go talk to our buddies, the ambulance drivers, right? So he goes to the ambulance drivers, and he's like, hey, remember, you got the bloody nose. Your buddy rolled over, fell off the cliff. And he's like, my spine hurts. And they're like, what? Traction, like right away in a neck brace on the stretcher in the ambulance driving to the hospital. Like they come back like we had to take your buddy to the hospital. I'm like, oh my gosh. So he's in the hospital. So at this point, with how much time we had lost with welding and the brakes and the running out of gas, I was like, you know what? I want Robert to drive, even though he was like by far the biggest guy. I was like, he's gonna be on the team next year. He's gonna be the captain the next year. I want him to get the experience driving, right? And so I was like, Robert, you're gonna drive the third leg. Like, all right. So J-Lo pulls over. Robert gets in, and at this point, we have enough gas. It's hard to tell because again, they're doing the lap counts, and we didn't have the live feed like you guys have with how many laps everything's going. So we just know it's been like 3.5 hours. So we're like, he's probably going to finish the race. We'll just go in the grandstands and we'll watch the rest of the race. So we sit in the grandstands. It takes a little bit of time, and we don't really see him come around again. Then we hear over the loudspeaker, we need to clear the area for a helicopter landing. Clear the area for a helicopter landing. And right away, I just stand up and go, Robert! Like, I just know it's us, right? I just know it's us. So I just run down to where their helicopter's landing, right? And I'm like, is it us? And he's like, yeah. And so he did a similar thing where what James did with going to one of the whoopties, coming in too hot, and he rolled like the guy that was working there was like, that was gnarly. He rolled like 3 times, but boom, almost like when I went off the cliff. And he landed, and his feet were out above the roll cage.
Oh my god!
Outside the roll. You have the hood and everything like that. And his feet came out and were like over that. and he got out, and at first was like, cool, you know, like all this, and looking at the car and all this, and then he goes out off to the side of the track, and he just passes out on his feet, just like passes out.
God.
And they're like,
Just pass out. Goodbye.
get the ambulance. They're like, his teammate has the ambulance at another hospital. They're like, we don't have an ambulance, get a helicopter. So they had to get a helicopter because James was in the only ambulance they had at the site, at the other hospital. And so he gets airlifted to a different hospital. So my parents go to be with James, and then Dr. Sharif goes to the hospital that Robert's at. So we at least have somebody at each hospital. It's just me and J-Lo left to like clean up the mess, and they wouldn't let us get back on after that. I mean, what they did was they confiscated our car and they put it in a big Polaris trailer, and all the judges went in, and I'm like, I want to be present. You know, I don't want you guys like messing with the car and then being like, oh, this is why this happened or something, right? Like, I want to see what you're doing in my car. And they're like, nope, no one can be in, no one can be in. They closed the trailer and they're in there for like 30 minutes. Probably that's where they wrote all these new rules down, right? So this video is
the whole thing.
Is the guy above Jason. There's another guy, I forget his name, Bob or something like that, is talking to us. You're not going to hear it right now, but he's telling us this frame can't be used next year, and we're like, we always make new frames, you know, and chop it up and all this, and all these teams are coming around. Like now it's like in the middle, kind of where the helicopter landed, and it's kind of like on the way out of all the pits and everything. So now everyone's just coming around like, this is the car that went off the cliff, and all these rollovers and 2 guys in the hospital. And so you can see this crack right there, right? Look at that gap right there.
Oh my God.
That's the rule, that you have to have a continuous rear roll hoop all the way around, because this was a welded joint where like 5 members were coming in, the top, the bottom, the side member, the cross member behind it, and like a diagonal. And so there was like a ton of weld in that area and stuff. In fact, it didn't even break at the weld, right? It broke on the tube.
Yeah.
Right here.
Like at the bend, I think.
Yeah, so that's the rule, that you have to have a continuous roll hoop because it's separated right here. And then they also had a rule that the gusset, you had to gusset the top of the roll cage in the corners. You had to put like a gusset, which I think they now got that rule out of there, but for like 5 years, because the top of it also like separated. So yeah, had to have a gusset there. There's more pictures at the end of all the damage. So yeah, right now he's giving us a lecture. We're trying to like secretly record it. That's why you can't really see anyone's faces. That's the head judge right there. And he's like, is your team coming back? And I was like, the guy in the hospital is coming back, but he's the only one. And he's like, oh, okay. Like, and like all these teams start like crowding around, and
Jeez.
So yeah, this is back in the lab at Cal State LA. So that was the front. So yeah, his feet, and you actually see it looks like he might have peeled it back with his foot, right? So see the hood on the top?
I mean,
his feet were above that, and so somehow his feet got out and was like sitting on the Briggs and Stratton sign.
Is that like a crack on the corner, like the front right corner of that?
Oh yeah, the up and down there. Yeah, I mean that's like 0352 tubing. That was like super thin. There's no rule on that. But yeah, when his feet came up over that black hood, and where it says Briggs and Stratton, like his feet were there, resting there.
So his feet pulled back and then up and over?
Yeah, and it looks like his foot pushed this, like probably bent this out, right? Like that.
Oh.
So it's like it's, yeah. You know, it was still drivable too. And so here's another rule. So see the tow hitch?
Yeah, the tow hitch.
Up 90 degrees. What's funny was when I went through the cliff diving, it was bent down 90 degrees.
So it went
like perfectly 90. And I have another picture of it, not in this video. And then we straightened it, and then it went up 90. And so now there's a rule that you have to have a swivel tow hitch, so that it like swivels on a shoulder bolt, so that you don't break your tow hitch off. Oh, and then I think the final one was that if you roll over 3 times in the in the endurance race, they take you out of the race. They don't let you keep going anymore.
I just noticed there's like a ton of oil like underneath. What is that? The gearbox?
Yeah, this was yeah, there
Blood.
might have been some leaking in the gearbox after that. This actually might be some brake fluid. Too, probably because of like the O-ring and when we cut the brakes, but yeah.
What was that, like 5 rules in one go?
Yeah, so there's the crush number at the end. Yeah, this corners you can't tell because of the padding on there. Now they don't have the padding anymore, right? I think.
I don't think it's a requirement, but I think a lot of teams do it just to protect their frame and their paint.
ECU rule. They might have took it out so they could actually see these corners because you could tell how sloppy this weld was. This was hard to like weld on during the competition right here. That was like one of the ones I had to fix on the spot. Dan might have fixed it. There's the SMS mobile still attached. It lost a wheel, but it's still attached after all of that. So yeah, we were the only 2 left. We had to like pack up the car, pack everything up. Everyone else was at the 2 different hospitals.
Like the front panel.
What's like that?
The front panel.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. We're in good spirits though. So here's the everyone who rolled had the same cut on their neck from the seatbelt. Robert's was a little bit less defined, but we were the Rollover brothers.
That's like an album cover for like a 90s rap album.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
And then Robert had black eyes. You see him start. This was like the same day. Black eyes. It might have been the next morning, but black eyes from the impact and like the goggles that he had on, like the pressure. And then he had a black. You'll see from the seatbelt, he got bruised from the seatbelt. And we had to stop at the pharmacy to get their prescriptions on the way home. And then we're like, screw it. It's already been through enough. Let's just push it off the truck. I ain't lifting this.
Get out of here. You're done for.
Oh, so this was the weird thing. I had like a good luck shirt. And I welded in it the entire time. It was a long sleeve because I learned I get sunburn when I weld, right? Like the radiation.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to do it in like cutoffs and stuff because it was always hot. And so then I was like, after one day of welding, while my arms were red, I'm like, I'm gonna wear a long sleeve when I weld. And then when we painted the car, we had to spray paint the car. We didn't have any other nice painting, so we would just buy like 100 yellow spray paint cans and spray paint the car. So my shirt had like yellow spray paint. It was just like through the whole year of like grime. And I was like, I'm gonna wear this racing. So I wore it racing, and I passed it off to each of the guys in the who were gonna race next. So that was like a bad luck shirt, right? Because everyone who wore it, J-Lo didn't wear it actually, and I wore it, James wore it, and Robert wore it. And so at the end, we can get Robert from the hospital, and I realized like it's a bad luck shirt, right? And I'm like, hey, where's that shirt, man? We should burn that shirt. And he's like, oh, they had to cut it off me. You know how they do that, like when ambulance people or whatever. So like, you know, they had me on a stretcher and they just cut the shirt off of me. I'm like, okay. I was like, did they throw it out? Like, I still like to burn it. He's like, I don't know. I didn't get it at all. I'm like, all right, whatever. So we pushed the car out of the U-Haul, and the shirt is fully intact sitting on the seat of the car. Swear to God. I'm like, there's the shirt. I'm like, Robert, I thought they cut it off you. He's like, they did. And like, how did it get in the car? Because I put this car in here when you were in the hospital. Like, to this day, I have no idea, but that shirt was fully intact sitting on the seat of the car. And I was creeped out. I was like, this is a bad luck shirt. And we ended up burning it in the barbecue.
Boy had a concussion if he doesn't remember.
Yeah, but like, I know when I rolled that car in there that the shirt was not, I wouldn't have asked him where the shirt was, right? Like, it was creepy. It was creepy. So here's the lineup. So this number 23 car is the 7th place car from 0304 that we're actually getting back from Jose. Jose's getting it back, and he's gonna let the current team use it. And these are the other championship cars lined up. And then here's our beat up car next to it.
I love seeing that lineup, but it's crazy like how big the lab was that you could fit all that stuff in there.
Yeah,
Was
'cause
that
we,
one,
what we were
two?
doing where it was just Baja, and so like yeah, we had the whole thing to ourselves, and it was cool to have them like for reference and stuff. We actually led the homecoming parade one year, so Cal State actually had a homecoming parade. I don't know if they do it anymore, and since I was in sports, they knew me and was like, hey, and I told them I had these cars, and they're like, yeah, you guys can like drive in the parade. So we had these three, I think, the green, yellow, and red, and we led the homecoming parade, and it went through campus. So there was like the sign, and we were the first three cars, which was cool because people could hear it kind of coming, you know. We like rev it up, and we drove.
Lawnmower engine. To
Yeah, I
start.
know. But you know, you're in the library and you hear like engines going by, right? And so we drove by the library where you guys have the food, you know, all that new stuff wasn't there,
Yeah.
the food court and all that. And then we get to like that, you know, the parking garage by the art department, kind of. Um, and we just
Yeah.
and we had to get back to lab. We're like, let's race, and we just raced going all the way down the garage. You could hear the cars in the garage echoing. It was like freaking awesome. We drove him back. So yeah, we got to drive him a couple times. And then this was our senior design presentation. So we're all in suits and we like rolled out the wrecked car and we put it right in front of the classroom so people could see it. And our like senior design, like we did so much engineering on this car, right? And so much analysis and all this. And you could have had like super impressive final presentation, but you know, we were all kind of burnt out anyway. And so the presentation, I basically just showed like clips from competition and told stories and like didn't do any engineering at all, and like we still got an A. It was like we had enough good graces built up. So that's it. That's the story of 2005.
Dang.
I think we got all the rules in there.
That was like 5 rules.
Yeah,
At least 5.
there was the fire extinguisher mount, the 3 rollovers, the gussets, the continuous roll hoop, the tow hitch swivel, and the no numbers on the top.
What's that on the right where J-Lo is at? There's a canister. Is that like a reservoir for the?
Oh, up here, that's the SMS mobile.
Oh, that's big.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah. It was always cool. We always had that on there. And it's just 2 zip ties and it held on through all of the stuff I just showed you. It held on.
For all those of you who couldn't pass tech in the 05-06 season, you're welcome.
Exactly. Every time you'll notice when we do pass tech, Jason comes by and is like, let me do a final check. And he like always looks at the car and like, oh my God. And if I'm ever there, like as an advisor, they're like, get away, Kevin. Like I don't want him to see and like trigger any memories, you know? So I try to avoid Jason.
Give him some PTSD every time.
Yeah. But I mean, it was
here comes
talked about for a while. Obviously, we're still talking about it now. And I always say, I mean, we had a good car. We got 12th in the presentation in our out of, you know, we had like 105 teams give the presentation. We got 12th. And, you know, when we got 7th the year before, we were like 50th place going into the endurance race because we had no design report, cost report, like all that stuff. We just didn't have time to like do. So this year I'm like, I mean, we would have been a top 3 school if you know, we did our paperwork. So this year I was like, we're gonna do the paperwork. We were like so close to winning it. And then, you know, and we had the second fastest lap. So it's like it shows you everything has to go perfect for you to like get in the, you know, top 10. And obviously if you want to win it.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why I kind of kept helping out a little bit, right? It's like we were so close to being on the top that, you know, I was like, just got to get that extra push, get the paperwork, you know, and then we haven't gotten back in the top 10 since that 04 season.
We will soon, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely want to see that.
So after having these wild adventures, you definitely gave the team a lot of insight during all of your design reviews. And I'm not sure when we started doing lessons learned, but our team does lessons learned. So we go over, right, like any mistakes we made, things that we could have improved like throughout the season. And that's become like a really crucial part of starting the next competition year. And another one of the things we do is alumni design review. So we invite all the alumni to come back to the school once like we finish our design and before we start building. So usually sometime in the fall, we'll have the alumni come and basically have like a roasting session about like all the problems that our design has. And if we have any part of the car built, so that they can see like what's going on with that. So tell us a little bit about how, I guess, that experience is as an alumni, seeing students' progress, and also over the years, like the level of preparedness that the teams had, or maybe like the rule changes that you've seen, or anything. Does anything stand out to you in terms of the design review?
It's been different through the years, and it definitely has been a lot better in the recent years. I think I restarted when the school actually asked me to be a senior design advisor because they wanted to they were running out of senior design projects, which probably isn't a problem anymore. But they were like, we're gonna make it Baja, but we need somebody, to be the advisor. So like I would, essentially be almost like grading them, right, or like be the project manager like you would if you were at Raytheon or something. So I was like, okay. And so that's how I got kind of back into it. And that year was a disaster because there was an existing, basically they got into senior design and these 5 students were like told, you're doing the Baja project. And there was already a Baja team. So imagine if you guys are already working all summer and then senior design students came in and was like, well, we're doing Baja for senior design, right? And trying to integrate those 2 teams.
That's a really strange setup, actually. I didn't know that they had that. Seems really impractical.
And so, a lot of those students didn't want to do Baja. They were just told this is it. And they just wanted enough to get a C in senior design and graduate, right? And that just doesn't work with the Baja team, right? And so that was kind of a bad experience. But then I was able after that to say, I just want to help you guys out, not as an, senior design advisor. And it's been hard because I do have like a high standard, and especially after you've worked, by then I had worked 5 years at JPL, and you learn so much more. And it's like, oh, I just totally want to like explain to the students like the right path to like design something, but a lot of times they're not ready for that, right? And so it was really hard. I think I did start the lessons learned because that's what we have at NASA, and JPL has its own lessons learned. So I think I started that process, and I've been trying to get them to do right requirements and all this, but it was hard at first. I think I was too demanding on the students. And it's really easy when you see a design, like to pick it apart when you have a lot of experience, and it's really hard to just, try and get them to think to the next step, right? And it's definitely gotten better as far as people learning presentation skills and presenting it. I think I put a template together for like how to present a design, right? Because a lot of students would just like put the CAD up or just put FEA up with colors, and that means nothing, right? And or they'll show a dimension and they'll have 9 digits in the dimension from SolidWorks, because when you take it, it just gives you 9 digits, and it's like, oh, that frame member's got to be 12.7125721 inches. It's like they don't understand, the practical numbers and stuff. So it's been rough, and it's gotten a lot better, especially with like your guys's years. And I'm glad they embrace us, and bring the alumni in, because it can be like someone's poking holes at your design, right? And I'm sure as a student, I would have been not as welcoming of that maybe, but it's hard to strike a balance between helping them and giving them the answer, or just being too hard on them, because you got to remember like what you didn't know when you were a junior, right? And put yourselves in their shoes. But I like what you guys and people before you have helped develop for the team. Obviously every year you're going to get more alumni, so our alumni group grows. And I feel bad about the pandemic, because I think you guys had a ton of momentum.
Yeah.
Having a consistent advisor like Bachman, who's like super supportive, active, present. Like we didn't, like Sharif the first year was very present. Like he was teaching you stuff in the Baja lab. And then he was just like rubber stamping it, and I never saw him the whole year. And then we actually had to get other people just to rubber stamp so Baja could be a project, and they never showed up in the lab or anything. So I think having a consistent advisor, someone like Bachman, has helped for sure keep continuity. I think you guys started a Baja Bible, right? Kind of design practices. So it's been good. It's still challenging for me personally to sit back and not be like, you guys should have built the frame a month ago. What are you doing? You know? And I'm glad other alumni come in because they get different perspectives as well.
Yeah, I really liked, it was, at first it was annoying, but it's been probably like the starting off point of every single one of our design presentations. But when we started writing out requirements for our car and really understanding what the levels of the requirements were, I think that was a really big changing point in the way that we designed. And then that helped us a lot because our design presentations kind of sucked a little bit for a good while. Like we wouldn't get too many points on them, and we were always like, why aren't they good? Why aren't they good? And we were definitely guilty of doing like the FEA that we kind of didn't actually understand. And that led to like the workshops we have on YouTube now. So everybody can see them. And then one of the really helpful things too is we have the alumni basically put us through tech as if you were like an SAE volunteer and you're measuring the car just like they would. You go through the entire rule book, and that's super helpful. So I know for sure like those are things that they're probably going to stick with forever. And then I remember so after you're like you graduated from this experience, you're telling us about like how you got into JPL and how it's like it's a big deal now, like in retrospect, but at the time it was like an afterthought for you.
Oh yeah. So I mean, they came to me. I think I was at JPL during that competition. They came to me, Dr. Shaw, like what I was doing for that senior design and for Baja, and was like, hey, I got a couple students that work at JPL on a project, and you could go work at JPL. And I didn't know what JPL was or what it stood for. I didn't even ask. I was just like, I'm too busy. I got 22 units and I got Baja, and I was like, all right. And like the next day, Sami's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't turn it down. I was like, look, I don't even have a car. Like I can't even get there. I live on campus. And he's like, well, I have some students that go to this school, like you can like carpool with them. And then I like kind of looked it up and I'm like, oh, it's like a NASA center. And I'm like, and I mean, it was only like a stipend from the school, like $10 an hour or something like that. But he was like, you don't want to turn this down. And so I started working there while I was doing Baja. So that was definitely challenging. I think it was just a couple months. I started like in the January. So yeah, I was a student, like a contractor, basically working on a project there with other students at Cal State LA, and then did that for 2 years. And they then JPL, my supervisor was new to JPL, so I had a new supervisor, and he was like, hey Kevin, I want you to work on this other project. And he's like, I'll send you a charge number for it. And I go, I can't use a charge number. I'm a student. I don't even work here like full time. He's like, you're not a JPL employee? I'm like, no. He's like, all right, I'll make you one. And he just hired me right there. And so, it's just because I was already working there and he didn't even know because I was working like a normal employee there. And then I was still getting my master's degree. And so I told him I was doing that. He's like, all right, I'll make you a part academic part-time. So you get paid like a full-time employee, but you can only work 32 hours max. And you can finish school. And then once you get your master's degree, we'll make you a full-time employee. And that way they'll hire me as I have a master's. Otherwise, they would have just hired me and then gave me like a little bit of a raise for getting a master's. So I kind of held out until I got my master's in 2007. And yeah, I think I got my master's in 6 quarters. I would just take everything at once.
Jeez.
And yeah, by 2007, I had my master's and been working at JPL ever since. And that's where that's how I learned how to run projects, right? And like that's why requirements, like all that stuff that I'm doing, it's not like that I've like, asked the team to do, it's because I learned that that's how we do our projects at JPL, and they're successful. I mean, we just landed, you guys, it's good timing. We just landed another Mars rover, right? That's my section that does that work, and that's successful because we have lessons learned, right? We know what failed in tests before, and we have a Baja Bible. We have JPL design principles, right? And it tells you how much torque margin you have to have, and it just hundreds of pages of how much margin you carry, how to, all these rules that you have to follow. And if you don't follow them, you have to write up a document, a waiver, and you tell the institution why you're not following that, and they have to approve it, right? And so I just try to take that stuff and like show the Baja team that's how you're going to do it when you become an engineer. So let's start it now. Not only will it help you in your job, but it'll also make Baja more successful because you'll have these rules and it'll be more organized, right? So that's where I started pushing some of those other things.
I was going to ask, you mentioned that they designed the Perseverance rover. So can you tell us a little about what you do in like specific to that project?
So for that rover, I didn't work on any particular parts of that one. But right now I'm a systems engineer working on, it's called SWAT. So it's an Earth orbiting satellite that launches next year. And the way it happens is, and that's how I was trying to approach, Baja too, is you have system engineers who write the requirements, right? So if you think of it as a Baja car, what's your level 1 requirement? Like, what are you trying to achieve, right? You want to get first place, right? And all this stuff. So it's like, you might have a top speed or acceleration or a turning radius, like all this stuff, right? That's your level 1 goals. And for us, it's like science goals. So the scientists actually write that, right? Like for my project, they want to measure the ocean depth, the height of the ocean layers actually. And so they just come up with, well, we need to measure a certain frequency of the wavelength and all these science numbers. And then project system engineers take those and make them level 2 requirements that says, all right, to do that, we need an interferometer. Okay, how far apart do the antennas need to be? 10 meters to get this wavelength, whatever, And then you go down to level 3 and they're like, all right, how are we going to do this? And then you get all the way down to building an actual mechanism to deploy a boom to make an antenna 10 meters to read the sign, right? So it's like this trickle down effect. And that's how I was trying to have people learn Baja was your goal is to have this turning radius maybe. But how do you do that? You have a certain frame size, a certain wheelbase, a certain suspension, right? A certain kingpin inclination, all this stuff. So your end goal is just a simple turning radius. And that way you can have a frame having requirements. You can have somebody work on a frame that's going to achieve that goal, and someone work on a suspension that's going to achieve that goal, and they can work independently if they have their own requirements. And when you put it together, you're going to meet that turning radius. And you have like an interface, which is at the frame. So you have an interface agreement. Here's the mounting points of the suspension, right? So we call those mechanical interface control drawings, right? MICDs. So I still to this day look at JPL projects and see how you would break it down if it was like a Baja vehicle, right? And kind of do the project that way.
Yeah, you pushing that I mean, kind of going back to the whole design review and you pushing the requirements towards us, like it definitely helped a lot. And not just like, I know Krystal calls it like a roasting session, but to be quite honest, like the experience we had with you was definitely more difficult than it was going through actual design presentation at competition. So it's like, it said it like you brought us here and then we got to the design presentation and they're like here. And I'm like, okay, well, we can handle a lot more of this because obviously we've interacted with Kevin. And even more so, it even now that I've graduated and I'm working in the industry, like the same things that you've taught us or that you've showed us through Baja, like I use on a day, like even today, like I wrote requirements for a project that I was starting, like that whole thing. It's not just for Baja, but as an entire, like, I'm going to carry that, what you showed us because of what you learned at JPL. I'm going to carry that for the rest of my like engineering career. So I'm just trying to say Baja definitely is a huge advantage before you even go into industry, and having advisors like you or an alumni like you, it's such a huge help for sure.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. that here is worth, you know, the time. But it's, yeah, I agree, and that's why I give back to Baja, right? Like I said, I wouldn't work at JPL directly because he saw me doing Baja. I was like, well, he's a pretty good engineer. I'm gonna see if he can work at JPL for me. So like directly, if I didn't do Baja, I know I wouldn't have, you know, gotten that opportunity. But then when I got to JPL, I was like so good at SolidWorks compared to the students that were already there that I could like draw the antenna that I was doing the same day and animate it, and that they were like blown away. And to me, it was like super simple because Baja was like even harder, right? And so that made me like want to give back sort of to Baja. And also, you know, there's other schools like UCLA and USC that get more, you know, you get more prestige if it's on your resume and stuff like that. But I mean, there's like at least 10 people from Cal State LA that was like before my time that were my boss's boss went to Cal State LA. And I think the better the students are coming out of Cal State LA, you know, it raises everybody else that went to that school, right? And so now if someone at JPL, someone applies to JPL, like, oh, they went to Cal State LA, and it's like, well, Kevin went to Cal State LA, and if I was crappy, then it wouldn't look good for that person, right? And so it's like, I I want to be a good example for Cal State LA. It just helps everybody, you know, get jobs and grow in the industry and stuff like that. So that's the other reason I just want to like give back to Baja and the students at Cal State LA, because I feel like they're at a disadvantage. We don't have that much money. You talk to UCLA and Baja gets like 20K, like without trying, right? And they have water jet lab, CNC machines, which you guys are starting to get now too. But they just have all these endless resources. And I mean, my year we had four guys in a lab with a manual mill and built that whole car, right? And we had $3,000 budget. So that 2005 team, we had $3,000 for the entire year.
That always blows my mind that it was $3,000. Like we can't even buy suspension $3,000.
Yeah. Well, that included travel, which is why we just get like a U-Haul, and why we couldn't afford like a U-Haul for testing. And we went to ASI and I think had them like buy tires, so like we could ask for a specific thing. So we got a few sponsored things, but yeah, that's because we did everything by hand, and us and Dan. And yeah, that entire car was $3,000. And the sad thing was, like, our cost report showed it was like $5,000, right? When you follow the rules of the cost report, like how much a cut is and all this stuff, our car was 5,000, but I know we built it for 3,000, including travel, right? And so it's like,
that's all you had.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, sort of to wrap things up, because I know we kind of went a little bit over time.
All right.
We kind of want to know what's next. You know, I mean, I've known you for 3-4 years now, and you've been working at JPL and helping us out at Baja. Like, what's next for Kevin Knarr?
Well, I definitely want to retire at JPL.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And so I plan to do that. You know, my next project, hopefully, because I know some people working on it, when I'm done with mine, will be Mars sample return. So you saw the rover just now land. It's gonna leave little tubes of Mars soil behind. And right now we don't have a way to go get it. And the next project, Mars sample return, is already working on that. So, you know, it's a 3-legged thing where it's like a relay race, and we have one thing that's gonna orbit, one thing that's gonna land, one thing that's gonna launch. And so I should hopefully be doing system engineering work for trying to get that sample back to Earth.
That's so cool.
And that'll probably be like a 10-year project for me, right? Like the one I'm on now, I started right when my son was born. That was my first project, and he's almost 6. And people have been on that project like 5 years longer than me. So it's a long burn when you get on these big flight projects. So the next one, you know, I might only have one more project after that, and then I retire, right? It's just like a really long burn. So, you know, I want to do that. You know, I just moved to Vegas for family reasons, and so, you know, I won't be able to help out Baja as much except remotely, but you know, I'm down to do that. And I have some space here, and there's a lot of desert out here, so I might end up building a little car in my garage. And you know, if the Baja team if they're listening and want to come out to Vegas, I can host, and we can go driving out in the desert and testing.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Well, to sort of close it off, do you have anything that you want to plug? Do you have like a LinkedIn? Do you have like an Instagram page that you post a lot of nice things on?
I don't, except, I almost started my own company called Gnarly Engineering.
I remember that. I remember.
Yeah, my last name, Knarr. I'll probably regret this, but if you Google Gnarly Engineering with a K, I have a little website, and it might even show me welding the Baja car. And I was basically asking if anyone, kind of like a freelance engineer, right? If anyone had designs out there, I have a 3D printer in my house, so if anyone needed like some prototyping done or building done, I'm really looking for people that have problems, and then I can find a solution, right? So if anyone has like a problem out there, like, oh, I wish I could, it was easier to do this or that. I like thinking of those solutions and building prototypes and stuff. But I'm so busy at JPL, I kind of put that on the back burner, and definitely plan to just be at JPL the whole time. And it takes up most of that, and raising my son takes up most of my time. So.
So look for you at gnarlyengineering.com or.
I'm looking at this logo right now.
Oh man. I got a little surfer and a gear. It's a surfer and a gear.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did that when I was on paternity leave when my son was born. And I was just thinking, now that I have a kid, it'd be nice to work from home and all this stuff, right? And so that's when I was thinking of starting my own company. And I got the name and all that, but I didn't make it farther than that.
Yeah, I can't find the Baja picture. I don't think it's on there.
I might have had one in Skills or something like that. I think I have a picture of me welding in there somewhere.
Oh, there it is. I found it.
Oh yeah.
We'll get the Cal State LA students, the computer science students, to build you a really nice website.
Oh yeah.
We'll exploit them
that
for
all by myself. So, but thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm thankful for what you guys helped build at Cal State LA for Baja team, and this podcast will hopefully keep it going. And so keep it up. I'm glad you guys are doing this. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here. Well, hopefully we can have you on again. We'll have Jose on. We'll try to reach out to him and see if we can schedule something out. But we appreciate you taking the time, and most importantly, appreciate you helping out the Baja team. It definitely helped us out a huge ton. Even just being there at comp, just hanging out with us is such a great thing to have. But yeah, thank you again, Kevin. This has been the Staying Muddy podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Staying Muddy podcast. If you like what we do, join our subreddit, Staying Muddy Podcast, or if you would like to learn more about our team, you can visit our website, Castelli Baja CE, or follow us on social media at Castelli Baja CE. Thanks again for listening.